Joining us now, former senior operations officer with the CIA, Mark Polymeropoulos, and national security and intelligence reporter at Foreign Policy, Amy McKinnon, back with us. Good to have you. Mark, from what we're hearing about the embedded folks inside the Russian army putting out on social media about how badly the Russian military is doing over the course now of months. What does that say to you? Is that significant?
Well, I think it certainly is. These are bloggers who are certainly pro-Russian.
Right.
And so it's interesting. They're not saying things like we shouldn't have invaded Ukraine. What they're saying is our military leadership is incompetent. And I think that's what you're going to see start to build over time because the Russians have taken really spectacular losses. So as we see opposition, inside Russia to the war, I think it's going to be based on things like this, where Russians are coming home in body bags. Not necessarily that they shouldn't have invaded Ukraine, but much more so they're really an incompetent force.
Joe?
Well, Mark, speaking of incompetence, and we've been shocked, obviously, by how bad they are on the battlefield. But one of the areas where Vladimir Putin was supposed to be a giant was in disinformation wars. You look from the beginning of this war, Zelensky and the Ukrainians have just absolutely crushed the Russians on information war. And just look at this past weekend. You even have propagandists for Russians sending out on Signal to their 2 million followers how badly things are going with the Russian military, shocked by the military's incompetence in Ukraine. And then, of course, you have the Eurovision contest where, once again, Europe, the Western world, all unite around Ukraine. My God, I just haven't seen anything like this in my lifetime. One country so masterfully using every bit of social media, every bit of information arteries across Europe and the world to dominate an opponent like they're dominating Russia.
Well, this is true, and there is some irony here because, of course, what Russia did to us in 2016 was pretty dramatic. They used these exact mechanisms in terms of disinformation operations, social media, are really our weakness in this. I think our allies, certainly the United States, but our allies, including the Ukrainians, have learned, and so kind of turning the tables is something that I think is going to be quite satisfying. It's, certainly for the intelligence services of the West, but ultimately we're beating Russia at their own game.
Jonathan Lemire.
So, Amy, we talked about poor Russian morale among their troops. There's been a lot of speculation in recent days about the health of Vladimir Putin, and there's been certainly a lot of condemnation about the poor leadership from Russian generals on the battlefield. Give us your assessment there in terms of just the Russian military tactics right now. Even as this war has seemingly constricted to the Donbass, it doesn't seem like they're faring any better.
No, and I think we're, at several junctures already during this war, analysts have begun to talk about turning points. And I think we now may be entering another phase in the war, which is Russia is, looks likely to have to scale back its ambitions even further. I mean, if we go back to the beginning of the war, the initial plan was for a lightning assault on Kiev, the expectations that the government would fall within 3 or 4 days. Clearly, that did not go to plan. Then they revised down that aim and they shifted to their focus on the Donbass, and all estimations were they were looking to try and take control of the full Donetsk and Luhansk regions in the east. They are now struggling with that, with British Defence Intelligence reporting over the weekend that the Russians are estimated to have lost as much as a huge portion of the troops, a third of the troops that they had arrayed around Ukraine ahead of the war. And I should say that's not necessarily deaths. We don't know. That could be injuries. That could be gone AWOL, captured. But certainly a third of that force taken off the battlefield, which is the main point. And so I think we're already beginning to see a kind of a second phase in Russia again scaling back its operations.
Michael Steele.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to the point you were just making about incompetence versus, shouldn't have invaded Ukraine among these bloggers. Do you see the potential for that attitude changing where it does become, why are we here? I mean, do you see these bloggers now putting out a different narrative back in Russia with their millions of followers, or are they so entrenched themselves that their frustration is more focused on the fact that our guys just can't seem to get out of their own way versus, wow, they're incompetent because maybe they shouldn't be here in the first place?
I think it's more of just the incompetence factor now. I mean, we've seen, and of course it's always hard to judge the accuracy of opinion polls in Russia. but even the ones where we give a little bit of faith to, the Russian people are really behind this. Right. So I think it is interesting, though, and this is something that will build, that there is criticism of the incompetence. And then take a look at what's happening with the Russian intelligence services now. I know there was reporting last week, at the end of last week, that Vladimir Putin has replaced the FSB, the internal service, who had the Ukraine mandate. He's replaced them with Russian military intelligence, the GRU, and in fact, he put in a senior Russian paramilitary officer with a really brutal track record to head up Ukrainian operations. And I don't know if that is going to have an effect on the battlefield, but it certainly doesn't portend well for future brutality. But overall, again, it's another sign that the Russian military and intelligence services are not doing well.
Yeah. Joe?
Yeah, but I mean, Mark, he keeps shuffling people in and out. We hear, he's going to bring a general to the front line in Donbass, and he's more brutal than the last general. And my God, they do even worse. And now he's doing. I mean, he finds himself in a position where all of the people, all of the cronies that were around him before this war, that these relationships that he built up over 20 years as an autocrat, they've all dissolved. I mean, you look at whether it's military, whether it's intel, whether it's the oligarchs, my God, they've all fallen away.
Well, this, of course, is what happens to autocrats. So, at the end of the day, he's suffering from a lack of information, certain terrible decision-making. But I think we'll see this continue. He will continue to shuffle different parts of the security apparatus until he believes at least he gets it right. But so far, it's not working.
And there's no possibility he isn't watching this closely.
No, of course not. But I think to go back to Joe's question, I mean, there's a common misconception about Vladimir Putin that he is some master strategist, that he's some kind of grand chess player. And I think what this whole war in Ukraine has just demonstrated is that that is absolutely not the case. I mean, when you look at Finland and Sweden now saying that they're looking to join NATO, the strengthening of NATO's eastern flank, all of these kind of things that Vladimir Putin has had nightmares about for the past few decades.
They've gotten worse.
He is now made to come to fruition single-handedly himself. So, and I think that just goes to show that, he is not the kind of grand chess master that we all like to make out that he is.
National security and intelligence reporter at Foreign Policy, Amy McKinnon, and retired CIA operations officer Mark Polymeropoulos. Thank you both very much for being on this morning. And